Ah,
Thank you.
wonderful, Sebastian. What a perfect way to start our Sunday morning. The next part of our platform is our statement of the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture. And if I will ask Beverly, our board president, to share our statement.
Thank you, Janice. For those of you who've been coming to BSEC for a long time, you know these are mission and our vision, which are included in this statement. And for new folks, you can get familiar with us from what I have to say. The Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture was founded in 1907 to create a supportive community within which people connect, learn, grow, raise families, and act to create a better, more humane world. We seek to bring out the best in ourselves and in others, and to live with awareness, compassion, and empathy. As an ethical culture society and community, we strive to live by a set of ethical and humanist principles. We are committed to raising the quality of all our relationships and to enhance our thinking with new insights, information, and inspiration, so that both our understanding of the world and our capacity to act ethically grow stronger. With those commitments, we recognize the obligations that history places on us. We meet and live on land taken from the indigenous peoples who were here before us, and in a society whose individual and collective wealth was built on the stolen liberty, labor, and lives of Africans, as well as the exploitation and oppression of immigrants, women, and workers in general. Our name proclaims our intentions and recognizes our deep obligations. Those obligations call on us not just to acknowledge them in words, but to practice them in deeds. We commit ourselves to fight for social, racial, and economic justice, to work toward protecting our planet, to do good in the world. We welcome people from all traditions, backgrounds, races, family configurations, gender identities, and sexual orientations. We recognize the inherent worth of every human being and celebrate the strength that comes from our diversity. We strive to face the challenges of racism as we work toward becoming a truly multicultural, anti-racist society.
Thank you.
And my internet is unstable, so I hope you got that.
Yes, we did. Thank you. So I'm Janice Novet. I will be the presider today. And I am a member of the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, and I serve on the board. I am very pleased to welcome you all here today, friends, family members, and newcomers. And now we have our second musical selection, live from Rotterdam. It's Sebastian West.
We ask you guys to please mute yourselves so that we can actually hear Sebastian.
introduce our speaker, in this platform, Chris West, who is a BSEC member and amateur Street Epistemology practitioner, will share a set of tools that create a safe and non-threatening environment which supports communication across difference. It's not to convert anyone, but the ability to stand in the shoes of those we hope to connect with and reduce polarization. It is also an opportunity to examine our own thinking. As Bertrand Russell said, in all affairs, it is a healthy thing now and again to hang a question mark on the things you have long taken for granted. And to introduce Chris, I'm actually going to read his biography a bit because this is a great way for us to meet a new member. Chris West spent his formative years living and going to school in Park Slope. He went to IS 88 and then went on to study at Music and Art High School. After getting a BA in Cultural Anthropology from SUNY Purchase in 1988, he founded the Temple of the Apotheosis, a non-denominational community, social, and spiritual humanist group operating in and around Park Slope. In 1999, he met his wife and they moved to the Netherlands for 10 years. There, he raised his 2 young children as a stay-at-home dad and earned a BS in mechanical engineering from the Technical College of Amsterdam. Chris also studied and became one of 3 Americans to be certified in as a Dutch windmiller. In 2010, he moved back to the US, this time to the woods and lakes of Vermont with his wife and 2 children. He now lives in Jericho, Vermont, with 1 son in college in Rotterdam and 1 about to leave to study medicine at SUNY Stony Brook. The nest again is almost empty. For work, Chris is a building science consultant, designing passive house compliant homes, as well as other work, sawyer, builder, remodeler, humanist YouTuber, and building science educator. This past year, Chris formed the Humanist Being, a nonprofit humanist organization in Vermont. And with that, I welcome Chris West. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen and just give me a moment to get that up and running. That should work. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time out to come and listen to me talk about street epistemology, which is something that, as Vincent said, we've been delving into as a group, but also as individuals for the past 3 years or so. This is not quite the right forum for this, but if anybody has heard of street epistemology in the past before you interacted with this, it would be interesting to know. And we can maybe, so Fiona has heard about street epistemology in the past. That's great. So let's just start off with what is epistemology? And I just have Rene Descartes here, just as known as the founder of modern Western philosophy. So epistemology is the theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. And the second line for me is the one that really gets to the crux of it. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. It's more about the why you believe in something than the what. Street epistemology is known to a lot of people as various things, but it's always interesting to start off by what it isn't, because there are a lot of misconceptions about what street epistemology is. I have an image here of Reed Nicewonder. He's one of the YouTubers who does street epistemology, and this is him in 2015 when he first set up his little setup in the park in LA. And he had the sign, "What do you believe and why?" and having short interviews. So what is not something that is street epistemology? Street epistemology is not an argument. It's not a debate. It's not preaching, evangelizing, or proselytizing. It isn't a forced discussion and should have no coercion. it shouldn't be entertaining in and of itself. We're not trying to get gotcha moments with people. We're not trying to expose people. And it's certainly not limited to religious beliefs. It's actually something that can be used as a critical thinking tool for any belief. So what is street epistemology? Well, first of all, it's a term that was coined by Dr. Peter Boghossian, originally in a book that was called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And I've heard interviews with Dr. Boghossian. He says that was actually not a title he wanted. It's what his publishers wanted to, as kind of a galvanizing title. And if you actually were to read that book, you would find that it's not at all about making anybody an atheist. It's about looking at claims and the truth of claims and why we believe them. He did come up with a second book a couple of years ago called How to Have Impossible Conversations, which is a much more condensed and clearly laid out process for learning street epistemology. It is a brief, friendly, and honest discussion. And it focuses on the foundations of the reality of a belief, the truth of a belief. And when we say truth, we mean what conforms with our joint reality. There are plenty of things that we can talk about, but when we're talking about truth in this context, we're talking about, does it conform with what a repeatable, falsifiable investigation will show. And it's a process of asking questions, listening charitably. I'll say it a couple times during the presentation. Charitable listening is a term used to describe listening and assigning someone who says something the most charitable interpretation of what they're saying. Once again, not trying to get gotchas, not trying to trap them into saying something and then beating them up about it, but really giving them the benefit of the doubt. And then one of the processes is summarizing to make sure that we, as the street epistemologist, the person practicing it with an interviewee, understands what they're saying. We don't want to put words in people's mouth. We want them to say what they mean, and we want to be able to meet them where they're at. And most importantly, this is a respectful partnership. Doing street epistemology is a process where you have a goal, and part of that goal is to be respectful and have a good conversation that the people will want to come back and have another one later, right? We don't want to beat people up. So what is it really? Well, it is a Socratic dialogue, a series of questions being answered that identifies the reliability of the methods that someone has used to form their opinions about something being true, and doing that in a respectful manner. And here Socrates, it's better to change an opinion than to persist in a wrong one. So once again, trying to conform, have our ideas conform to what we all agree is common reality, which is a hard one, right? We can have discussions about what that is. That gets very ontological. Ontology is the study of what is real. So what is the aim of our street epistemology? And the aim is to help people to re-examine the processes that they use to, what we sometimes call the toolbox of thinking, and either good or bad critical thinking, and offer people the ability to revisit these thoughts that they've had, these concepts that they believe, that they were often given to think of and to believe before they had the mental capacity to do that. When we teach children about beliefs that are being taught to them before they have the ability to be critical thinkers, which starts happening in your late 9, 10, 11, 12, depending on the person and the model that you're using to describe it. But real critical thinking is thought to occur in late childhood, early teenhood. And part of it is an attempt to create an opportunity of a moment of what's called doxastic openness, and to avoid doxastic closeness. And I'll go into what doxastic is right now. I'm saying doxastic, what the heck is that? So doxa is Greek for belief, and doxastic openness is a person at a time and a mood when they're willing to look at and get a better understanding of their reasons why they believe things, either by looking at the old evidence in a new way or by taking on new evidence and questioning why that was true. And doxastic closeness is where someone just shuts down, where they're like, no matter what you say, something that happened in our interaction is causing me to no longer want to be open and honest about my experience and my feelings or my reasons. And at that point, if you've as a conversation partner, if you've hit a point where someone is doxastically closed, then there's really no hope in that one conversation to get them back to doxastic openness. It's kind of they're hunkering down, they're feeling threatened, they're no longer going to be open to really honestly and critically look at their beliefs. And if we are having a conversation and our partner doxastically closes, then maybe we should look at what we did in that interaction that may have elicited that response. But sometimes it's just a trigger. Sometimes people just shut down because they feel you getting close to something that's very sensitive, and if changing it, if they really did change it, could upset their entire life. So you have to be very careful when we're talking about, you're dealing with people reviewing deeply held beliefs, because even though if we look at their belief, the belief itself may not be well grounded as, re-looking at it and as an adult, the things that are associated with leaving that belief could be so threatening to the person. They may lose a community, they may lose relationships. The threat of no longer being a part of that community, it can be quite shocking. So we also have to be very aware that when we're asking someone to talk about their deeply held beliefs, that if there's a shift in that could change their lives. And that's why some people will close down doxastically if they perceive a threat to their place in their community and their families and all that. So what is the process of an encounter? Here's Reed Nice-Wonder again, talking to people, and it's a very relaxed kind of thing. I've heard people, when they hear me talk about it and I don't explain it well, they're like, well, you're just proselytizing for atheism. And that's not, if I'm doing that, then I'm not doing street epistemology. If I'm doing that, I'm getting it wrong. So the process starts out with a sign like this, or sometimes I've seen someone like Anthony Magnabosco, there'll be links for that later on, where he just stands at the head of a trail in San Antonio and says, hey, I'm just talking to people, I'm doing 5-minute interviews, are you interested? And if the person engages, great, and if they don't, that's fine. No one is being forced to engage in this conversation. So you say hi, the person's obviously interested in having a conversation, they sit down with you, and then you just start a very simple greeting, right? Hi, oh, it's a nice day, what are you here doing? Oh, I'm out, I'm gonna walk that trail. Oh, I love that trail. And then that's enough, because what you're doing is just trying to create a teeny bit of rapport where you have something in common, so that you're going into this as partners in the conversation instead of a questioner and a questionee, even though in the end, what the street epistemologist thinks about something is not so important in the discussion, because we're really talking about looking at somebody else's beliefs. Oftentimes someone will ask, well, what do you think about that? And one common response is, well, I'd be happy to share with you what I think about that after we get a little further into the discussion, but I really want to just concentrate on where you are at, but I'd be happy to share. I'm not trying to hide anything. Being a person who is being honest and open about yourself is very important as well. This is a conversation. This is you're doing this together. So you get together, you're sitting down, and you choose a topic, and that topic can be about anything. It can be about theism, like a God claim, or do miracles exist? Does intercessional prayer work? Can prayer or faith healing work? Karma, ghosts, climate change, vaccines. Do you believe in evolution? Do you believe in the scientific method? Anything. It doesn't have to be a claim that maybe most of us here would think is not well founded in reality. It can be things that we're completely sure about, because if it's a good, well-reasoned and based upon belief, then investigating it should lead us to the answer at the end. Yes, that's a justified belief, not, well, I hadn't thought about it like that. Maybe I have to rethink this. So one of the next steps is to ask the person, based on that question, what their level of confidence is that that is true. And so you just say, on a scale of 1 to 100, do you believe that vaccines cause autism? And then the person, and I'm just throwing it out there, that person will assign a gauge to that. And we like to get that gauge so we understand where the person is at the beginning of the conversation. And then after the conversation progresses, at the very end of the conversation, we can revisit that question to see if their confidence has changed in any direction. Right? Sometimes it gets stronger, sometimes it gets weaker. It really depends on the conversation of the person and their own epistemology. And then once we have figured out, the introduction, that we're talking about this topic and where the confidence level is at the start, then we can start applying the Socratic type of questions to try to draw out the why they believe that. And it's important also not to leave these as open-ended discussions. Most of these discussions are between 5 and 20 minutes long. Sometimes they get a bit longer, but in general, somewhere around there, I've seen an average of like 10 to 12 minutes. And all we're looking for there is to kind of ask someone to go through the steps that they went through or think that they went through for the basis of why they believe what they believe, and to try to unravel that. And once you get to that point, you can say, well, that was a great conversation. Thank you very much. If you see me around and I'm here in the park and you'd like to continue this conversation or have another conversation, or here's my email, if you'd like to further it, that can happen. But these are not hour-long, drawn-out processes. So when we're asking questions, we like to ask what's known as calibrated questions. We're in general trying to get the person to talk as much as possible about why they believe what they believe. So, and we don't want to lead them with our own questions or our own ideas about that. We want all of this information to be coming from them. So we ask questions that start with what? What is it that caused you to believe this? That is a question that doesn't have a yes or no answer. It's not a question that has a short answer. Hopefully, this is a question that opens up the person to, going through a 2 or 3 minute description of answering that particular question. What is it about faith that you think is a reliable process for reaching the truth, right? Getting to the truth of a situation. And in general, though not always, we try not to ask questions that have very short answers to them, unless it's like, I'm going to repeat this to you. Did I get that right? Am I understanding your position right? That summarizing thing. That's a perfectly good question. And that obviously has a yes or no answer. And once we have a couple of, or an answer, then we try to test it for reliability. And this is the critical thinking part, where we're trying to be modeling critical thinking skills for the person and for the other people who may be watching. So you can say something like, how does that particular thing relate to the truth of your belief? So for instance, if someone were to say, well, I believe it's true because I had a personal experience about it. And you can say, okay, so personal experience is one way to gather information, but how reliable is personal experience in relating to how true something is, right? Well, I'm sure we've all heard about the studies that have been done that show that eyewitnesses and the use of eyewitnesses in courts is horribly flawed, that memories are not things that we have in our head. They're actually these stories that the engrams that we form in our brains, we recreate all of our memories as we remember them. So we have a memory, and that's how the engram can change over time. So our memory can change about something. And there's even a horrible, scary study that showed that a researcher, after 3 one-hour sessions, could actually implant memories into someone. So even things that never even happened. So if someone was to say, yeah, I had a personal experience, then you could say, do you use personal experience as a way of reaching the truth in other parts of your life? Which may be a yes. Another question is, can someone use that method and still be wrong, right? If you're making a claim, and that claim is, and that the belief that you have is based upon this particular type of thing, can that person claim that thing and still be wrong? And wrong, by meaning wrong, I mean not conforming with reality. Another question that we'd like to take is, what would convince you that the belief is not true? Then you see that once again is another calibrated question. What would convince you? If you have this deeply held belief, can you imagine something in the world that you would interact with as information or experience that would convince you is wrong? If the person says no to that kind of question, then there's really not many places to go with that. You can say, well, okay, that's an interesting response, that there's nothing that would convince you it's true, or that it's not true. More importantly, this is that the scientific falsifiability, right? A claim that's unfalsifiable is also not something that can be claimed as ultimately true, because something has to be falsifiable in order to be true in some situations. Something can't be true in all situations. There's something called the outsider test, which is a great one. It's when somebody makes a claim and claims something like faith is the basis for their belief. And then you can turn around and say, well, I was talking with someone who believes that faith is the basis of their belief too, but their belief is completely different. They are a believer in this thing that is in direct contradiction to what you believe. How can I, as a person who doesn't believe either of those things, discern which of those conforms with reality, if any of them? That's called the outsider test. Another one is the method that you're using a reliable method to determine if something conforms with reality? Again, using faith as an example, people don't use faith to decide whether or not it's safe to cross a street, right? People are going to actually open their eyes and look to see if the truck is coming and then cross the street. They're not just going to say, well, I have faith that my superpower is with me and they're going to guide me across. No, so that's another interesting question, to try to ground it more back into an everyday decision-making process, right? Because the reason that we don't just cross the street is because we have experiences that just crossing the street without looking and just believing that I can get across the street safely without looking doesn't always work well for the person who's employing that method. And there's the last one, which ties back into that, which is, do you use this particular method in other parts of your life? Do you use this same system of coming to believe that something is true in other parts of your life? And these are good ways to test someone's reliability or confidence in that method, and whether that method is something that they're only using in this very, very particular moment, or this very particular thing, this topic, and we want to ask them to revisit that. What are some threats to successful street epistemology? Misunderstandings are a big one. One of the things that we're really big on in street epistemology is letting the person share a definition that we can then agree upon and move forward with. But if we can't get to a point where we're agreeing upon a term, then we're not talking about the same thing, and misunderstandings can arise from that. Lightning questions, that's a term used to describe topics that are lightning rods for people, that you're accidentally touching something that you did not know is going to cause a very big and emotional response, maybe taking them from being doxastically open to being doxastically closed. And there's no way to know that. I mean, people's lives are full of experiences that you cannot know about. Although a lot of people think that we can read minds, in general, we can't. Sometimes you just walking through a minefield and accidentally trip a mine. You can't help that. A big issue is bringing your own message or leading the conversation. I mentioned that earlier. What I think about something, or me trying to set up a series of questions which will eventually lead to them going to where I want them to go, that is not what street epistemology is doing. And if I'm doing that, then I'm doing street epistemology wrong. And when you have a dishonest interlocutor, when somebody is not being open and honest in the conversation, or when they get defensive, once that happens, you can still have a conversation with them, but the chances of moving them towards a better understanding of why they believe what they believe is probably not something you're going to reach. As a matter of fact, Dr. Bogosian and Dr. Lindsay in the book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, suggest that if you get to a point where someone is closed off doxastically, or they're not being an honest interlocutor, that's when you use that opportunity to learn something yourself about how to deal with people who are not interested in actually having an honest conversation about it. So what do we keep in mind when we're doing street epistemology? Active listening, that charitable listening, interpreting what the person is saying in the most charitable way, that builds a rapport. It also lets them know that you're not trying to trap them or to get them. Respectful questioning. I'm not sure I understood you right. Just let me understand that, make sure that we're both on the same page. Or I completely understand that this is your process and I don't want it all bash your process, but just trying to be very respectful in the whole process. Don't be afraid of pauses. I'm from a family where we talk all the time. We're incessant talkers, but in a street epistemology setting, the pauses when a person is given the opportunity to actually think about their answer before they give the answer. So respecting pauses and not feeling the need to fill dead air is really important to the process. As you're going through, you want to summarize what you're talking about. Make sure that you're on that. When somebody says something to you during a conversation, it doesn't matter if it's a street epistemology conversation or not, but when someone says something to you, if you turn around and say back to them what they said to you, they hear more heard, that you've actually taken the time to listen to what they're saying and not just waiting your turn to say something, which is something that a lot of us do and are guilty of. And in street epistemology, that's just anathema. And the final one is, this is the goal of a street epistemology engagement, is to both be positive and good, honest and open discussion partners. And the goal is just to bring that framework in and to look at the method that was used for deciding that something was true, and see if that's a reasonable method for using, a good toolbox. So where am I at on time?
We're coming to the time when we'll start our small group activity.
Exactly. So I wasn't that far off.
No.
Do I have 3 minutes? Do I have 5 minutes? Do I have?
If you have 3 minutes and then introduce the small group,
I'd be happy to.
beautiful.
Okay, so what I wanted to do in this last bit, because it's very helpful, is just to play a little bit of an interview by Anthony Magnabosco, and to just see how he goes about interacting. I don't know if you can hear this. Can you hear this?
If this belief that's in your head,
Yes.
Yes, we can.
and this 100% certainty that the God exists.
Oh, and then I hit something and it's good.
if this belief that's in your head
Mhm.
and this 100% certainty that the God exists is
Oops, sorry.
based on a foundation of you being raised and taught something, how can you be certain that it's actually true?
It's kind of like how we were talking about earlier. It is very faith-based.
We're going to definitely have to unpack this faith-based thing.
I don't know. It is pretty broad.
What is a faith-based?
Faith-based
thing?
is that you can't see him, you can't always hear him. You just have to believe that he'll pull through for your favor, and even if it isn't in your favor, that he'll work it into your favor somehow. A lot of negative things happen in life, but it really depends on which route you take that. But I just think it's something that's inside of you as well, which can go along other religions too, because like being out in nature gives you a lot of peace. Like when I pray, I have a lot of peace and feel like I have more direction, and I pause and reflect more. And, you know, like I said, it's faith. You can never be kind of like you're thinking about that 90%, but I don't know how else to put it. That's hard. I haven't actually talked that out with somebody before.
So there you go. Here's Anthony McNabasco just very gently and honestly asking this this woman about this faith thing, this basis, one of the bases for her belief, and he gives her a lot of space. He's not interrupting her, he's not giving her more questions, but just letting her go through a process. And in the end, she says, you know, I've never really thought about that before. And that is that moment. That's the Doxastic open moment where next week, after this person walks away from this interaction, may think, you know, I never have looked at that, at why I think faith is a good reason to believe something. I mean, I love Anthony's method. I love his process. And then, once again, he was just standing at a trailhead in Texas. This woman voluntarily came up and had this deep conversation with him, which may in some way cause her to deeply or more deeply think about why it's okay to use faith as the basis for this world defining belief, right? If you are and I'm not projecting this on this one, but I have seen and talked to people who vote a particular way because they believe in the whole package of their religion. And if that religion is in some way, or the belief in that religion in some way shifted a little, maybe they won't be as stringent in thinking, you know, trans rights don't matter, or you know, I need to vote for people who are going to push for this particular political goal, because that is a part of what believing in this stuff has. I just do want to point out, thank you for taking the time for that, but I do want to point out that as a person, I don't have a care about what someone believes in their house. I care about how what they believe affects who they vote for and what laws they make that restrict other people's rights. That's really all I care about. I'm fine with people believing anything they want, as long as they're not trying to impose that belief on the rest of us unnecessarily. And that's why I think street epistemology is a great tool, because it allows us to have these discussions without attacking someone. Like, I could have jumped up and said, "What a stupid person, you believe in faith and that." No, that's not what we're doing here. We're really being respectful and just trying to create these little moments of, oh, well, you know, as an adult, I've never thought about that. Let's think about that as an adult and see whether it still holds water. Look, if it still holds water and they go back and they say, you know, I did look at it, I'm fine with it, great. At least they've taken the moment to be critical about their own beliefs. Even me, you know, the liberal Vermonter, originally, you know, Jew from New York. I challenge my beliefs all the time, and I think we all should, because we want to be as close to reality as possible. So thank you for for indulging me in that little bit